Everything you need to know about To Kill a Mockingbird Chapter 14. Now that you're done with Chapter 14, let's talk about it. This chapter starts with Scout telling us that Aunt Alexandra didn't talk anymore about the Finch family, but Scout and Jem overhear people from the town pointing them out as his children and passing comment on how they can roam all over town. When Scout overhears someone mention rape, she's reminded she wanted to ask Atticus about it, so after dinner she asks him. He gives her a very dictionary definition that is obviously way over her head, so she doesn't get why Calpurnia wouldn't tell her what it was on the way home from church. Of course, the whole story of going to Calpurnia's church comes out. Atticus is amused, and Alexandra just stares, and we can tell she's not happy. Scout remembers Calpurnia invited her to come stay with her, and right away Aunt Alexandra says no, but Scout mouths off and tells her, "I didn't ask you." Atticus is up right away, telling Scout to apologize for her disrespect, and reminds her that she is to mind him, to mind Calpurnia when she's there, and to mind her aunt. Scout scoots out of there out of embarrassment, pretending to have to go to the bathroom. She stops in the hall on her way back and can see Jem pretending to read a magazine in the living room while Aunt Alexandra and Atticus go back and forth arguing. Bottom line, Aunt Alexandra wants Atticus to let Calpurnia go. Atticus won't have any part of it, telling her that Calpurnia won't leave until she wants to leave, that she's a member of the family, she doesn't let the kids get away with anything, and the kids love her. They get quiet, but Scout can tell Aunt Alexandra is ticked. Jem sees Scout and comes out of the living room, and they go into his room. Now, when in the room, Jem tells her that they had been fighting, and tells Scout not to harass their aunt anymore. Scout's immediately annoyed since she feels Jem has been acting superior like he's an adult. He tries to share with Scout that Atticus has been really weighed down by the Tom Robinson case. Scout argues that she hasn't noticed anything, that Atticus seems fine. Jem tells her that because she's young, she can't keep things in her mind like grown-ups do, and includes himself in the category of grown-up. Scout gets really mad asking Jem who he thinks he is, so Jem threatens that if she doesn't stop bothering her aunt, that he'd spank her. Now this makes Scout flip out, and she physically attacks Jem, and to her satisfaction, he fights back. So in her mind, him fighting back makes them equal again. They keep fighting until Atticus comes in and puts a stop to it. Atticus sends them to bed asking who started it. Scout says Jem was trying to tell her what to do and asking if she has to mind Jem too. Atticus says she has to mind him when he can make her. And Alexandra is watching, basically telling Atticus that this is one of those things she's been talking to him about. Alone again, Scout and Jem saying goodnight, but in her room she goes to turn on the light. She steps on something weird. She feels it move, so she goes into Jem's room asking what a snake feels like and that she thinks there might be one in her room under her bed. Jem goes and gets a broom and pokes around under the bed. He didn't believe Scout at first, but he came in and tried anyway. Now, when he's swiping around under the bed with the broom, they hear a grunt, and something starts to come out from under the bed, and Jem kind of throws the broom towards the ground and nearly hits Dill as he comes out. Dill says he's starving, so Scout goes and gets him some food. So when she gets back, she asks Dill how he got there, and he tells this elaborate lie, like he often does, about being chained in the basement by his stepdad, and escaping and working in a traveling animal show, and when he was close to the Finch's house, he walked there. Jem then asks the same question because he knows it's a lie, and we find out that he took money from his mother's purse, caught a train, and then walked to the Finches and been under the bed for about 2 hours. He claims he'd have come to help Scout beat up Jem, but that Jem was bigger now and that he knew Atticus was going to come in and stop the fight anyway. So to Scout and Dill's surprise, Jem says that people will be worrying about Dill, so he gets up and calls for Atticus. Scout says that this action broke the remaining code of their childhood. Atticus comes in and tells Scout to get Dill some better food and that he's going to go tell Rachel that Dill's at their house. When Dill protests, he doesn't want to be told on, Atticus says he's just going to let her know what's happening and ask if Dill can stay the night. And then basically tells Dill he needs to take a bath because he's filthy. While Dill is eating, his Aunt Rachel shows up and chews him out before finally hugging him and letting him stay one night. And Alexandra's prodding that everyone needs to go off to bed, so Dill ends up sleeping with Jem, and at some point in the night, Dill comes into Scout's room so they can talk. Scout asks Dill why he ran away. Dill's basic explanation is that he feels his mother and his stepfather just aren't around all the time and are not interested in him and spend very little time with him. Scout says that she doesn't want grown-ups around all the time, that she couldn't do everything she wanted to do if they were, and that Dill shouldn't want them around all the time either. So Dill tells her that's not quite it, that she's not quite getting it, and tries to explain by telling her that he just feels kind of pushed away, telling him to go play, they tell him to go read, to tell him not to hang around the house, to go out and be a boy. He then tells Scout that they should get a baby, but neither of them is quite sure where they come from. As Dill goes on talking, Scout finally asks why Boo has never run away. Now Dill says maybe he doesn't have anywhere to run to. So what do we get from this chapter? Now as a whole, this chapter functions primarily as a transition to bring Dill back into the storyline, to be present with Jem and Scout as they face the events of the trial, because it's going to be picking up steam in the coming chapters. Since it's the school year, Dill would not normally be present, but we see more insight into his family life as he has to run away to the only really refuge he has in his life, which is the Finch home. Some reoccurring themes are touched upon in this chapter. We see Atticus assert his integrity, affirming what Miss Maudie said of him earlier in the book, that he's the same in town as he is in the public street. When pressed by Aunt Alexandra to dispense of Calpurnia, he strongly makes a stand, even with the family pressure. He doesn't buckle. But at the same time, he maintains his standards of respect when he tells Scout to apologize for her rudeness to her aunt. He's compassionate to Dill, obviously sensitive to what Dill is going through and what would have motivated him to run away, making sure he's well fed and reassuring him that he's going to speak to Rachel and just ask if he can stay the night. He's looking after Dill. We also see some of Jem's continuing maturation, which is contrasted with Scout's immaturity. Jem can see the strain and pressure that Atticus is under. Jem is no longer going to cover or lie for what he knows is wrong, which is why he takes initiative and brings in the adult authority when Dill shows up in their house and calls in Atticus. Scout, still firmly stuck in childhood, cannot see anything wrong with her dad. Thinks he's fine. She sees Jem's betrayal of them with snitching on Dill being there. Even though she later admits that Jem thought he had to do it, she doesn't understand why. Scout is still unable to empathize with anyone either. Remember the lesson from the beginning of the book was to try and see things from someone else's point of view, to walk around in their skin, and we can see that Scout cannot quite do this. She doesn't see Atticus's weariness. She doesn't see Jem's motives to protect Dill or to look out for him, and she doesn't understand Dill's experiences of neglect from his family. So, if any questions about chapter 14 in the box below, you can ask. Get ready for chapter 15. Things really start to move at that point.